Live from Washington, this is BBC News. Russia's President Putin declares an Easter truce in its war with Ukraine. Kyiv says Russian attacks are continuing on several fronts. The United States says very good progress has been made after a second round of talks with Iran on its nuclear program. And the U.S. Supreme Court pauses the deportation of dozens of Venezuelan migrants, putting it at odds with the Trump administration. Hello, I'm Carl Nasman. Welcome to the program. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says Russian attacks are continuing on several front lines, hours after Vladimir Putin declared a 30-hour pause in fighting over Easter. Writing on X, Mr. Zelensky said Ukraine, quote, would act accordingly, mirroring Russia's actions, silence in response to silence, defensive strikes in response to attacks. He also called for an extension of the truce, which he said would reveal Russia's true intentions. A senior Ukrainian official told the BBC that Ukraine's troops were told to hold fire minutes after that pause was announced. Yeah, but this is what many heard across the country just moments later, air raid sirens blaring in Ukrainian cities. The Kremlin's surprise announcement comes after U.S. President Donald Trump threatened to abandon efforts to broker peace between Russia and Ukraine unless rapid progress is made. Fighting has raged since Russia launched its full-scale invasion of Ukraine more than 3 years ago. You can see there on the map the land Russia has seized in that time, around 20% of Ukrainian territory. And the UK Foreign Office has now responded to that announcement, saying in a statement, quote, now is the moment for Putin to truly show he is serious about peace by ending his horrible invasion and committing to a full ceasefire, as the Ukrainian government has called for, not just a one-day pause for Easter. Charles Kupchin is a senior fellow at the Council on Foreign Relations and formerly served as the senior director for European Affairs at the U.S. National Security Council. He gave me his analysis. Let's just get your reaction there to what we're hearing now from the UK and another country saying, look, if Russia's serious about a ceasefire, why not make it 30 days instead of 30 hours?
You know, Carl, I think that the bottom line here is that so far we can only see this as a public relations stunt, because in the middle of 3 years of an onslaught against Ukraine, an offer to pause for one day, and the pause appears to be a little bit here, a little bit there. This is more an attempt to show that Putin is on the side of peace than it is to really negotiate an end to the war. If he stepped forward tomorrow and said, okay, let's go from 1 day to 30 days, or even more importantly, he began to articulate terms for a peace deal that Ukraine could at least begin to think about living with, then I think we have something to talk about. But at this point, it seems to be more smoke and mirrors and perhaps a response to what we heard from President Trump and Secretary Rubio the last couple of days, which, hey, folks, we're frustrated. Time is running out.
I mean, I think it's easy to be cynical, obviously, in this war, which has dragged on for several years now. But could this be seen as a positive step? I mean, does this at least show in a slight way that Russia could be open to some sort of more protracted ceasefire?
I mean, some small step is better than no step.
Yeah.
The problem is, going back to 2014, when the Russians first went into Crimea and Donbass, we've seen pauses before, and all of them disappeared quite quickly. I don't think we should throw in the towel. I think that Trump should stay the course and try to negotiate an end to the war. And I don't think it's a futile effort, in the sense that, Putin wants a good relationship with Trump. Putin would like to come in from the cold. The problem is that I think by undermining Ukraine, by saying to the Ukrainians, we're going to walk away from you, maybe we're not going to give you weapons anymore, Trump is in some ways making his goal more elusive, because he's weakening Ukraine's strength at the negotiating table when he should be strengthening it.
This pause is temporary. What do you see then happening once this is over, once the Easter holiday is over? Do you see the two sides just going right back at it?
I would expect the fighting to ramp back up. We're hearing from your correspondents that There are sirens going off. There's artillery fire. There's fighting going on. So this isn't even a full truce. But I do hope that the shuttle diplomacy continues and that an effort is made to build some common ground between Zelensky and Putin. Because even though this conversation has been going on for a couple months now, we really haven't seen any signs that Zelensky and Putin are nearing some kind of meeting of the minds. And I think the real party here that's dragging its feet is Russia. And that's because Putin hasn't made clear that he's ready to stand back from his maximalist war aims, which include the subjugation of Ukraine, regime change, winning this war.
The Trump administration is urging the U.S. Supreme Court to formally deny a request to block the deportation of Venezuelan migrants accused of being gang members. That all comes after the court ordered a pause on the deportation of more than 200 people accused of links to a Venezuelan gang, something that many of them deny. The American Civil Liberties Union is suing the government over the planned deportations of Venezuelans detained in North Texas, saying that they haven't had the chance to contest their case in court. The men are being held under an 18th century law. It's called the Alien Enemies Act, which gives the president power to detain and deport natives or citizens of enemy nations without the usual due process. The administration has used the law to deport hundreds of alleged gang members to El Salvador, where most are being held in a maximum security prison. Well, joining me live now is Lee Galert. He's the lead lawyer in the Alien Enemies Act Challenge and deputy director of the ACLU's Immigrants' Rights Project. It's great to have you on. You've been leading this legal challenge. What did you make then of this ruling by the Supreme Court? Was this the outcome that you were looking for?
Yeah, it was. We were extremely relieved. I think had we not got that ruling from the court last night around 1 a.m., there would be individuals in the El Salvador prison right now, one of the most brutal in the world, and they may have remained there for the rest of their lives. And, you know, as you said in your introduction, there's a few fundamental points about this. One is it's a wartime authority from 1798. It's only been used 3 times in our country's history, all during declared wars. So it's not meant for peacetime. So we don't think it can be used at all. But even if it could, you have to give these individuals due process. You have to give them notice that they're going to be removed under this wartime authority and give them a chance to go in and contest that they're not actually gang members. And the Supreme Court made that crystal clear in its earlier ruling on April 7th. And the government has just simply flouted that ruling, completely ignored it, gave these men 12 to 24 hours notice, didn't tell them they had the right to contest their removals, didn't even give them in a language they could understand a notice. And so we had no choice but to ultimately go to the Supreme Court to try and block this. The case is a long way from being over, but this is an important first step.
Now, you asked actually for what, a 30-day period essentially for legal review for these specifically, I believe, the detainees there in Texas. What happens now then? What do you expect to take place over these 30 days? What kinds of legal steps will they be taking?
Well, so nobody has actually ruled on whether it should be 30 days or some other period. The reason we asked for 30 days is that seems like a reasonable amount of time for people to get lawyers and get into court. But it's also what we gave Germans in World War II, the last time the United States ever used the Alien Enemies Act. The U.S. Supreme Court is ultimately going to have to rule again because the government just went back to them in the last few hours and filed a brief. So they're going to have to rule again. We'll see ultimately how long they give, but whatever time frame it turns out to be, it cannot be 12 to 24 hours.
You know, last week, the Supreme Court allowed deportations under the Alien Enemies Act to go ahead. We heard from a White House spokesperson today saying that it's confident in the lawfulness of the administration's actions. What do you make then of what the White House and in some court cases judges are saying? I mean, is it lawful to go ahead with these deportations?
Well, so the Supreme Court didn't actually say that these were lawful. It just simply said you should file in different courts, and that's what we've done. And the overwhelming majority of judges have said that what the administration is doing is not lawful. I think we're confident in our position that the Alien Enemies Act can't be used during peacetime. It's a very, very specific statute. It says you may use it when the United States is in a declared war or when a foreign government or nation is invading us or engaged in a predatory incursion. Those are clearly intended to be military conflicts. So we're confident in our position. But the one thing that we absolutely have already heard from the Supreme Court about is even if you can use this act, you have to give individuals due process. Many of the individuals, they overwhelmingly, almost every one of them, disputes that they're gang members, and they have not had a chance to prove that in court. And the evidence is emerging that many people who are sitting in a Salvadoran prison, again, perhaps for the rest of their lives, were not gang members, not remotely gang members, and yet they may now never get out of that prison.
Do you think that this ruling will have any sort of impact on the case of Kilmar Abrego Garcia, who had been living in Maryland? We just saw a U.S. Senator visit him there in El Salvador, but he also says he didn't get this sort of time to file a legal challenge to this. Do you see the Supreme Court's decision today impacting individual cases like his?
I think at this point, our two cases are in a different posture. So I don't know that the ruling last night or whatever the Supreme Court may do in the next couple of days in our case will directly impact that. But I suspect the administration is going to go back up to the Supreme Court in that case, and we'll see how they handle it. We have, over 130 Venezuelan men in our case who were sent to the Salvadoran prison under the Alien Enemies Act, sitting in that prison, and we intend to try to get them back.
Just 10 seconds left here. 7-2 decision. Some conservatives joining in there. Does that give you hope maybe that you might get further positive rulings, at least the way you see it?
We feel like our position is right. It's always difficult to predict what any court will do, so I'll leave it there.
All right, Legal Learned with the ACLU. Always great to get your thoughts on this. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Iran has described a second round of talks with the U.S. and Rome over its nuclear program as constructive. Further discussions planned to take place on Saturday in Oman. Those will be aimed at limiting Tehran's nuclear program in exchange for lifting economic sanctions on the country. Joe Inwood reports. Let's take a look at some other stories making headlines. Thousands of people have taken part in rallies across the United States in protest of a number of President Trump's policies. Demonstrators carried banners supporting Ukraine and urged the government to stop arming Israel. Others chanted their backing for migrants who'd been deported and denounced threats to remove funding from universities. Houthi media outlets in Yemen are reporting that at least 2 people were killed and many others injured in U.S. airstrikes on the capital, Sana'a. Those outlets also reported 13 American airstrikes on the port and airport in the western city of Hodeidah. It comes after U.S. strikes on the port of Ras Isa on Friday killed at least 74 people. That's according to the Houthi-run health ministry. Pakistan is expelling tens of thousands of Afghans who the government says are undocumented or only had temporary permission to stay. According to the United Nations, close to 20,000 Afghans have been deported from Pakistan this month. Taliban officials in Afghanistan say 700 to 800 families are being deported from Pakistan daily. It expects more than 2 million people to follow in the coming months. A team of scientists say that they've discovered a new color that no human has ever seen before. It's called Olo, and this is close to what it looks like. It's kind of a blue-green hue. The researchers say it appeared during an experiment where lasers were directed into the scientists' eyes to stimulate cells in the retina. The team say the new color can't be reproduced on screens, but that it could deepen our understanding of how vision works. Now, Ren Ung is a professor of electrical engineering at the University of California, Berkeley. He was a co-author of the study. He's one of just 5 people who've actually seen the color, and he told me what it looks like.
It looks blue-green, as you said, like kind of what I'm guessing folks saw on the screen, but it's just more saturated. It's a more intense blue-green than anything I've ever seen before, and it's because it's more intense than any blue-green you can see in the natural world.
What was it like seeing that color? I mean, did you see that and immediately think, wow, okay, this is something I've never seen before?
I did. It was breathtaking. I call it kind of like a peacock blue, an incredibly intense teal. But to be sure that we were seeing something that you couldn't see in the natural world, in this experiment, we put it in direct comparison, alternating one on top of the other with the most saturated blue-green that you can ever see in the natural world, which is a laser color in the teal wavelength. And in comparison, actually, I brought a prop because I was trying to give folks a sense of what it looks like.
See it, yeah.
Okay? If you imagine that you go around the world and you've only ever seen a yellow that's this saturated before your whole life, and then one day you see this, okay, that level of saturation, that's kind of what it felt like for me to see, to perceive Olo.
Well, before we go, we can show you some live pictures now. This is in Ukraine, in Kyiv, actually. This is the St. Michael's Church. You're watching some early Easter services there. Of course, this is all taking place amid a temporary ceasefire announced by the Russian President Vladimir Putin. Cities across Ukraine bracing to see if that ceasefire will hold, a temporary one around 30 hours. Of course, Ukraine has already signed on to a 30-day ceasefire, something that Russia has yet to do. But the early hours there, you see in Ukraine, people there celebrating Easter already on Sunday. I'm Carl Nasman in Washington. Stay with us for more on BBC News.